One of the first steps that many e-learning designers and developers do is to complete an e-learning analysis. Now, there are many different types of e-learning analyses that you might conduct. For example, some of the most common ones might be a job task analysis, where you're trying to understand what a worker or an employee is doing on the job. Or you might conduct a needs analysis to try to understand what needs an organization or a learner has. There are many, many different types of analyses that you'll find yourself conducting as a adult education professional who is working in e-learning. What I've provided for you here is an example. Now, you can download this template and create a copy, but this is a questionnaire that will allow you, that will walk you through answering some key questions that I have found from my experience as being particularly important when you go about developing courses or lessons in an online or e-learning environment. This first section deals with questions about the project. Now, this is something that you might use when you're interviewing your client. So for example, you can use a question like, can you tell me about your ideas for this project? Using broad questions like this will help you better understand the larger context that your client is trying to address or trying to solve. You'll also notice here as an example, the second question is asking them what problems that you're trying to solve by implementing this course or this training program. This is a very important question because in many cases you'll find that people who think they needed to implement training or a course actually have a much bigger performance issue that they will need to address. And so oftentimes providing training is not necessarily going to be the most appropriate solution given the situations that they may be trying to solve. So these are questions that are intended to help guide your conversations with your client. And there's a section here where you can add your notes as such. So I'll just say add notes here. That'll give you an example of how you can add your comments and notes in there. The second section of the questionnaire guides you through better understanding the learners that your course is going to influence. So this could be an interview with your project client, or it could also be with a representative learner, or let's say a subject matter expert or an SME. These audiences and these groups that you might be working with all can have varying perspectives that you'll want to make sure that you capture and understand through this analysis process. And so, for example, the first question is, who is the primary audience for this project? For example, if you're working in an insurance field, maybe your primary audience is your claims examiners or your adjusters, for example, and maybe your secondary audience is managers or customers. There are a lot of different ways that this might play out, and it's very important to understand these sort of demographic profiles of who your learners are and what motivates them in this process. You'll also notice questions in here that deal with what tone or voice or attitude will resonate with your learners. And this is quite important because oftentimes, especially working in an academic setting, we may use a very formal tone, but really our learners are going to be more apt to respond to a more informal tone. In that case, we may use more contractions or a more informal type dialogue when we talk with our learners. And so these are some things that you'll want to think about and consider, again, as upfront in this analysis process. Now, it's important to note that this analysis document is quite lengthy, and you may go through this process and not have answers to some of these questions, and that's quite all right. This is really intended to provide a framework and a benchmark, if you will, for you to go back to and try to understand what it is, the goals that this project should have, and to understand the sort of design criteria that you might be working with when you go about actually developing the online lesson or course, the solutions that you end up creating. So try to fill out as much of this information as you can. Talk with your representative client, your simulated client, and see if you can find a representative learner or two to ask them some of these questions that might relate to how you go about developing this course. In this process, you're learning, you're going through, you're trying to understand and learn what it is about the learner and about the needs of your client that this online lesson or online course is designed to help solve.